Sap.
The hum of the hospital waiting room was a low, persistent thrum against Michael Corinthos's temples, a sterile white noise that did nothing to quiet the frantic rhythm of his own heart. Before him, the swinging doors to the surgical unit stood as an impassive, mocking barrier. Behind them, his father, Sonny Corinthos, was fighting for his life. The details were a chaotic blur, a sudden collapse at the office, Carly's panicked call, the frantic ambulance ride. The doctors were using words like aneurysm and critical condition, each one a shard of ice in Michael's veins. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were bloodless. Dante was on his way, his police siren a distant wail growing closer. Carly was speaking in hushed, urgent tones with the chief of surgery, her posture a perfect blend of steel and fragility. The entire family orbit was collapsing inward, drawn to this singular, terrifying point of crisis. It was in this vortex of dread that Michael's gaze, scanning the sterile, impersonal room for the 100th time, landed on a figure hovering near the vending machines. Jacinda. She was wringing her hands, a paper cup of untouched coffee trembling slightly in her grasp. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a distress that seemed to go beyond the concern of a business associate or a casual friend of the family. Michael felt a flicker of surprise, then a warm rush of gratitude. Jacinda had been a steady, if somewhat enigmatic, presence in their lives over the past year. She'd worked with Sonny on a few charitable ventures, and Michael had found her to be sharp, compassionate, and possessed of a quiet strength he admired. He'd even, in his more private moments, entertained the idea that there could be something more between them, a possibility that felt both exciting and complicated. He pushed himself up from the plastic chair and walked over to her. Jacinda. I didn't know you were here. She jumped slightly, as if pulled from a deep reverie. Michael. I heard. I was at the Metro Court when the call came in for Carly. I had to come. I hope that's okay. Her voice was tight, strained. Of course it's okay, he said, his own voice rough with emotion. It means a lot. He'd appreciate it. He gestured vaguely toward the surgical doors. He's tough. He's been through worse. It was the mantra they were all repeating, a fragile incantation against the terrifying unknown. Jacinda nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on the doors, a profound sadness etched into her features. He has to be, she whispered, more to herself than to him. He just has to be. The intensity of her emotion was striking. Michael had known Jacinda to be empathetic, but this felt different. This was raw, personal. It was the kind of fear one reserved for family. He dismissed the thought as a projection of his own spiraling anxiety. Everyone was on edge, everyone's emotions were heightened. Hours bled into one another, a torturous stretch of hushed conversations, bad coffee, and the intermittent, uninformative updates from weary-faced nurses. The family huddled together, a fortress of shared history and fear. Through it all, Michael was acutely aware of Jacinda's presence. She never intruded, never demanded attention, but she remained a silent sentinel in the corner of the room. She'd fetch water for Carly, offer a comforting hand on Dante's shoulder when he arrived, his face a mask of grim determination. She was woven into the fabric of their vigil in a way that felt both natural and, to Michael's increasingly observant eye, strangely profound. It was during one of the few moments of relative quiet, when Carly had finally been persuaded to rest in a nearby family room and Dante was on the phone with his mother, that Michael saw it. Jacinda was standing alone by the large window overlooking the city, the dawn light beginning to paint the sky in hues of rose and gold. She had her back to him, her shoulders shaking silently. He approached her slowly. Jacinda? She turned, and in the soft, nascent light, Michael saw tears streaming freely down her face. This was not the controlled concern of a friend. This was a gut-wrenching, soul-deep grief. Hey, he said softly, placing a hand on her arm. It's going to be okay. We have to believe that. She shook her head, a sob catching in her throat. You don't understand, Michael. You can't understand. Try me, he urged, his own fears making him desperate for any distraction, any connection. She looked at him then, her dark eyes swimming with a lifetime of pain he had never glimpsed before. It's just so unfair, she choked out. To finally find him, to finally have him in my life, and now, this. The words landed not with a quiet understanding, but with the force of a physical blow. Finally find him. They echoed in the silent chamber of Michael's mind, dissonant and terrifying. His hand fell from her arm. Find who? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Jacinda's eyes widened in sudden, horrified realization. She had not meant to say that. The emotional dam had broken, and a truth she had guarded for months had spilled out. She took a step back, pressing a hand to her mouth. Nothing. I didn't mean. I'm just upset. I'm not thinking clearly. But Michael was thinking with a terrifying, crystalline clarity. Pieces of a puzzle he never knew existed began to click into place with a series of soft, devastating clicks. Jacinda's immediate, fierce loyalty to Sonny. The way she sometimes looked at him with a mixture of awe and longing. The stories she'd told of a difficult childhood, a mother who struggled, a father who was absent, a ghost. She'd never given a name. She'd spoken of him with a curious blend of resentment and a desperate, unfulfilled need. Sonny Corinthos was a man with a past. A past filled with shadows and secrets, with relationships that flared brightly and burned out quickly. He had children he hadn't known about for years, Christina, for instance. The pattern was there. No, Michael said, the word a low, disbelieving breath. Jacinda. What did you mean, finally find him? Michael, please, not now, she begged, her tears flowing anew. This isn't the time. I think it's the exact time, he countered, his voice gaining a hard edge. The world had narrowed to this moment, to this woman standing before him, to the terrifying truth looming over them. Him. Who is him? She looked toward the surgical doors, as if hoping for a divine intervention, for the doctor to emerge and shatter this unbearable confrontation. But the doors remained closed. The universe held its breath. Sonny, she whispered, the name a broken sigh of surrender. I was talking about Sonny. The confirmation was a seismic shock, reverberating through the very core of his being. Michael felt the floor tilt beneath his feet. He stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time. He looked past the stylish clothes, the professional poise, the warm smile she usually wore. He looked for a resemblance, and now that he was searching, it was staggering. She had his mother's eyes, the woman Sonny had loved and lost so long ago, but the set of her jaw, the slight cleft in her chin, the way she held her head when she was determined, it was all Sonny. How had he never seen it? How had any of them been so blind? He's your father? Michael managed to say, the words foreign and toxic on his tongue. Jacinda nodded, her body slumping in defeat. Biologically, yes. My mother, her name was Lena. She met Sonny in Puerto Rico, a lifetime ago. It was a whirlwind. Intense. But he was Sonny. He had a life, a dangerous life. She got scared. She left before she even knew she was pregnant. She never told him. The story unfolded like a familiar, tragic play. Michael had heard variations of it his whole life. Sonny's magnetism, his dangerous allure, the collateral damage left in the wake of his passions. All these years, Jacinda continued, her voice hollow. I grew up with stories about this larger-than-life man who was my father. A ghost. A legend. My mother loved him until the day she died, but she was also terrified of him, of his world. She made me promise never to seek him out. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. But after she passed, the need to know, it was like a physical ache. I had to know who I was, where I came from. So, I started digging. I found him. I orchestrated a reason to meet him, those charity projects. I just wanted to be near him. To know him. And you never said anything? Michael's voice was rising, the shock giving way to a torrent of anger and betrayal. To him? To any of us? All this time, you've been lying to us? To me? It wasn't a lie, she insisted, a spark of her own fire returning. It was an omission. I didn't know how to tell him. Hi, I'm the daughter of a woman you knew for a few weeks 30-something years ago? How do you drop that bombshell? And then I got to know him. I got to know all of you. And it became even harder. I saw the man he was, the family he built. I saw the pain his absence had caused others. I was terrified of disrupting that. I was terrified he would reject me. Or worse, that he would accept me and it would tear everything apart. Michael turned away from her, running a hand through his hair. His mind was a maelstrom. Jacinda. His sister. The woman he had been tentatively, cautiously falling for was his sister. A wave of nausea washed over him, so potent he had to steady himself against the window ledge. The memories of their interactions played back in his mind, now tainted, grotesque. The lingering glances, the casual touches, the dinner they'd had just last week where he'd found himself captivated by her laugh, it was all suddenly, horrifically wrong. You should have told someone, he ground out, his back still to her. You had no right to keep this to yourself. You let me. He couldn't finish the sentence. The humiliation was a living thing, coiling in his gut. Let you what, Michael? Jacinda asked softly, her anger deflating into a profound exhaustion. We're friends. That's all we've ever been. He spun around, his eyes blazing. You know it was more than that. Or it was heading there. Don't pretend you're that naive. You felt it, too. And you knew, with every conversation, every moment, that it was built on a foundation of a lie. My God, Jacinda, what were you thinking? I was thinking that I finally had a family, she cried, her composure shattering completely. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. With you, with Carly, with Donna, and with him. I was selfish, I know that. I was greedy for it. I couldn't give it up. I was just buying time, trying to find the right moment, the right words. The right moment? Michael laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. And when would that have been? After we'd started dating? After we'd gotten engaged? Would you have waited until we were standing at the altar to tell me the woman I was about to marry was my sister? The grotesque image hung in the air between them, a specter of a future that had been narrowly, devastatingly, avoided. Jacinda flinched as if struck, fresh tears welling in her eyes. Don't, she whispered. Please, don't. The swinging doors to the surgical unit finally hissed open, and a surgeon in green scrubs emerged, pulling his mask down. The spell was broken. The immediate, visceral fear for Sonny slammed back into Michael, momentarily eclipsing his personal cataclysm. Carly and Dante materialized instantly, their faces etched with a desperate hope. Family of Sonny Corinthos? The doctor asked. We're his family, Carly said, her voice trembling as she reached for Dante's hand. Michael moved to stand beside them, instinctively falling into the familiar role of the son, the heir, the protector. He was a Corinthos. This was his duty. But as he stood there, listening to the doctor deliver the cautiously optimistic news, the surgery was successful, he's critical but stable, the next 24 hours are crucial, Michael felt a fundamental rift open up within himself. He was standing with his family, but he had never felt more isolated. He glanced over his shoulder at Jacinda. She had retreated into the shadows, a solitary figure once more. But she was no longer just Jacinda. She was a living, breathing secret. She was a testament to his father's chaotic past. She was his sister. The relief of Sonny's survival was immense, a tidal wave that washed away the worst of the fear. But as it receded, it left behind a new, complex landscape of betrayal, confusion, and a deep, unsettling anger. The crisis was over, but for Michael, a new one had just begun. In the days that followed, Sonny was moved to the ICU, and then to a private room. He was weak, his voice a rasp, but the formidable strength that defined him was slowly returning. The family rotated in and out of his room, a constant stream of love and support. Michael was a constant presence, but his mind was a million miles away, trapped in that waiting room, hearing Jacinda's whispered confession on an endless, torturous loop. He avoided her. When she came to visit Sonny, which she did, tentatively and always when the room was crowded, Michael would find an excuse to leave. He couldn't look at her. Every glance was a reminder of his own foolishness and her deception. The warm, promising connection he had felt was now a cold, ugly scar. It was Carly who noticed the shift first. "Is everything okay with you and Jacinda?" she asked one afternoon as they stood in the hospital cafeteria line. "You two seem strained." Michael stiffened, grabbing a yogurt he didn't want. "We're fine. Just a lot going on with Dad." Carly, with her preternatural ability to sense emotional upheaval, wasn't convinced. "She's been a rock through this, you know. Really stepped up. She seems like a good person." "She's his daughter," Michael screamed internally. "She's my sister. She lied to all of us." But the words remained locked behind his teeth. This was not his secret to tell. This was a truth that belonged to Jacinda and, ultimately, to Sonny. The burden of it was crushing him. He watched Jacinda with Sonny. Now that he knew, the dynamic was painfully clear. The way she hung on his every word, the tender way she adjusted his blankets, the proud, wistful look in her eyes when he managed a weak joke. It was the behavior of a daughter, not a friend. And Sonny, in his vulnerable state, seemed to respond to her innate warmth, often telling Carly, "That Jacinda, she's a good kid. Got a good heart." The irony was a knife in Michael's side. The confrontation he had been dreading came a week later. Sonny was well on the road to recovery, his color returning, his voice stronger. The doctors were talking about discharge in a few days. Michael was in his father's room, going over some urgent Corinthos communications business, when there was a soft knock on the door. Jacinda stood there, holding a small pot of yellow daffodils. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Sonny said, a genuine smile touching his lips. "Come in, Jacinda. Brighten up this dull room." Michael's posture went rigid. He began gathering his papers. "I was just leaving." "Michael, stay," Sonny said, his tone leaving no room for argument. It was the old Sonny, the boss. "You can both hear this. I've been doing a lot of thinking in this bed. About life. About what's important." Jacinda set the flowers on the bedside table, her hands fluttering nervously. Michael remained standing, a sentinel of silent protest. "You two," Sonny began, his gaze shifting between them. "I've seen the way you are together. Or, the way you were. There's a connection there. A spark." Michael felt the blood drain from his face. "Dad, don't." "No, hear me out," Sonny insisted, his voice gentle but firm. "Life is short, Michael. Too short for hesitation. You're a good man. Jacinda is a remarkable woman. I don't know what's gotten between you lately, but I'm telling you, don't let pride or some foolish misunderstanding get in the way of something that could be real. I see the way you look at each other. Or, you used to." He smiled, a tired, paternal smile. "I give you my blessing. For whatever that's worth." The room fell into a silence so profound Michael could hear the hum of the medical equipment like a scream. It was the most well-intentioned, catastrophic thing his father could have possibly said. It was a scene from a Greek tragedy, laced with a cruel, cosmic irony. Jacinda looked as if she might be sick. Her eyes met Michael's, wide with panic and a shared, horrified understanding. Michael could take no more. The charade was suffocating him. The burden was too heavy. This blessing was the final, unbearable twist of the knife. "He doesn't know, does he?" Michael said, his voice cold and flat, his eyes locked on Jacinda. Sonny's smile faded, replaced by confusion. "Know what?" Jacinda shook her head almost imperceptibly, a silent, desperate plea. But Michael was past pleas. The dam had broken. He doesn't know why there's a spark. He doesn't know why we look at each other a certain way. He doesn't know who you really are. Sonny looked from his son's stony face to Jacinda's terrified one. What is he talking about, Jacinda? What's going on? The silence stretched, taut and unbearable. Jacinda seemed to shrink, the confident woman replaced by a scared girl. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Tell him, Michael commanded, his voice low and dangerous. Tell him, or I will. Tears filled Jacinda's eyes. She looked at Sonny, her father, and the love and fear in her gaze was so raw it was almost painful to witness. She took a shaky step toward the bed. Sonny. She began, her voice a fragile thread. There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago. She took a deep, shuddering breath, gathering every ounce of her courage. My mother, her name was Lena Reyes. You knew her in San Juan. A long, long time ago. Sonny's brow furrowed in concentration, sifting through decades of memories. Then, a flicker of recognition, followed by a dawning shock. Lena. He whispered. My God. Lena. Jacinda nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. She never told you. She was afraid. But, you have a daughter, Sonny. She placed a trembling hand on her own chest. You have a daughter. It's me. I'm your daughter. The words landed in the quiet room with the force of a detonation. Sonny stared at her, his face a canvas of utter, uncomprehending shock. He looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the very first time. The pieces were falling into place for him, too. The resemblance he'd never consciously noted, the familiar cadence of her voice, the inexplicable pull he'd always felt toward her. It wasn't a potential romance for his son. It was his own blood. His jaw worked, but no sound emerged. He looked from Jacinda's tear-streaked face to Michael's stony, angry one. The reality of the situation, the sheer magnitude of the secret, the bizarre and painful context of his own blessing, crashed down upon him. My daughter, he finally rasped, the words sounding alien and wondrous and terrifying all at once. Jacinda could only nod, her body trembling. A whirlwind of emotions passed over Sonny's face, disbelief, awe, a flicker of joy, and then, a deep, profound hurt. He had missed her entire life. He saw the pain in Michael's eyes, the betrayal he felt. He understood the impossible position they had all been placed in. He reached out a hand, his fingers trembling slightly. Jacinda hesitated for a moment before stepping forward and placing her hand in his. The contact was